I was just about to give everybody a compliment out there for doing a great job. I want to thank colleagues again on the council today. So I want to make some comments, and I think this is a topic that we as a community have to address. We have to be able to weigh in on, and we have to lean into it in a real way. And before I do that, I want to just say, to the folks who came out, those who are here and those who left, thanks for making your voices heard. Thanks for doing it in a respectful manner. I really appreciate that. Showing hands and appreciating those folks who speak, and there's a way to do it, and you guys did it in a way that I think is commendable. Secondly, there's a lot of issues that you brought up, law enforcement being one of them. You talked about, the homeless issues and social justice. We do, as a city, I will start off by saying it, all of us collectively, we can do a much better job on a lot of things that we do. But we do have, thank you for agreeing with that. Thank you for your support. We have a homeless program right now called Winter Sanctuary. So if there's truly people right now that need shelter or food, we can do that immediately. You can call my office. Cassandra is in the front row. We're happy to address that. This commitment of homeless housing first, we are committed as a city and a region to really try to create an environment where we create permanent housing opportunities. And you bringing it to our attention and creating an awareness is certainly very helpful. So I do want you to know your voices are being heard on that. The other thing I want to say that's important, because my comments are really going to be about law enforcement today and what can we do collectively. There's a national issue going on that's real, and there's local issues going on. And what we want to do in Sacramento is represent the very best of what's going on. In order to do that, you have to have a two-way dialogue. You have to have folks come in and tell us what we're doing great or tell us what we're not doing as well. And then we have to respond to it. We have to be able to say, you know what, we can do a better job, or we're doing this and maybe we didn't tell you. So this is what we're trying to create here in Sacramento. Also, within the city of Sacramento, there's the Sacramento Police Department and there's the sheriff. So there's two different bodies that kind of govern what we do here in law enforcement. You have a city council, which represents the Sac PD, and then you have the board of supervisors, which represents the sheriff. So just like you're here sharing with us, certainly feel free to go to a county supervisor meeting and share with them as well, because we all have to work together across the board. Law enforcement and crime and safety doesn't stop at city limits. We really have to be working collectively together. So I wanted to make sure I got those points out. So let me start with this, that I feel very strongly. You guys know I grew up in an underserved community. I grew up in Oak Park. I know firsthand the issues that are happening, not just here in Sacramento, but around the country. I mean, they're real. And the fact that I'm sitting here and we're all here at this moment in time, I think is because we have an opportunity to do something about it. And that's real. And what I would just ask, you folks, in particular, Christina and your team, is that you allow us to get to a place that we can have an honest dialogue. Because if we don't respect and if we don't give folks, somebody out there said it very well, we have to give each other the benefit of the doubt to be able to have that dialogue. And that's really, really important. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. It's not going to be solved in one meeting. It's not going to be solved in 1 month. It's going to take a continual effort for all of us to get to where we need to be. And we would settle for nothing less than for Sacramento to be an example in this country of where we're doing it the right way. And that's kind of what we're all signed up for here to do. So let me, say when I first ran for mayor, I said that my top priority would be public safety, and that continues to be true today. We all watched the events unfold in Ferguson, and here in Sacramento, we said we're not going to wait. We want to be proactive, and we want to start having these conversations, and I'm going to give you more to that in a moment. But I do want to say up front that I think we have an amazing police department, and I know we have a lot of men and women in uniform that are here today, and I think the job that you do is something that we all appreciate. And I think what we're trying to do is figure out how we can build the dialogue and the discussion so that folks who may not understand what we do, they get a chance to sit down with us, get a chance to know us in a real way. And that's going to be important. You put your lives on the line day in and day out. You sacrifice for service. And when one bad thing happens, it makes it feel like it's everybody. And what we have to do is be mature enough to understand that when you have things happening around the country, it may not be indicative of everything going on. And that's what I'm really challenging us to do in Sacramento. After Ferguson, I want to make sure that our law enforcement here in Sacramento doesn't feel like they're paying the price for every incident that happens around the country. For 6 years, we've all said that we want to make public safety a top priority with our budget and what we do day in and day out. And we've got to stand with law enforcement. And the great thing about this is where this dialogue comes into play, that we're going to listen to what we're doing well and what we can be doing better. And that's where you guys play a really, really critical role. So when I go back to Ferguson, I want to say that it happened on August 9th. On August 20th, we had our first community meeting. And we had a meeting where we had 250 people show up. We met in August, we met in September, we met in October, and we met in November. And there were 200 plus people at nearly every meeting that we had. And what was great about that is you're starting to see barriers and things being broke down because we're together having this tough conversation. And we want to be able to build on that. And the great thing about those discussions is we talked about issues of race. We talked about relationships between police and community. We talked about recruitment. We talked about residents being frustrated because their voices aren't heard. There were a lot of things that we discussed in those meetings. And my commitment to the community meetings, and you had elected officials there, Councilmember Warren, all these folks up here, Rick as well. But my commitment was to listen to the community and then say, I want to bring it back here to our chief and let him hear a little bit of what we've heard. So, Chief, I know you're not in the audience. I would love for you to come up for a minute so I can share a little bit in terms of where I think we need to go forward. We talk, and I've heard you say this. You said that we want Sacramento to be the safest big city in the state of California. And when we think about safe, I think it's important for us to understand. You want crime to go down on one hand, and what our community wants is public engagement to go on the other. And finding that balance is going to be really important. Yes, we want crime to go down. We want public trust to go up. We want to be absence of crime and present of justice. That's the balance that we're looking for. And when we have these honest dialogues, we have a chance to do it. These are very hard conversations because people on both sides are frustrated. So, Chief, my question for you would really be as I lay out a little bit of what I heard in all those community meetings for you to kind of digest it and take it back. And then I would love for you to come back in 30 days, maybe January 13th, and kind of tell us what you're doing, what you can be doing based on what you've heard, from the community. You were at a lot of those meetings as well, so thank you for that as well. So here's kind of how I'm framing it. It's this notion of community policing at the end of the day. We have law enforcement on one hand, and we have a community on the other hand. And we need to figure out, can we in Sacramento be a model when it comes to community policing? And that, to me, is the charge. If we want to be a 21st century police department with being excellent in terms of community policing, that means, again, as I said, there's a crime side of the equation, and then there's the public community side of it. So in organizing my thoughts, they really came into 4 buckets. The first one that I heard was training. That people in our community felt like training was really important. So we would like you to look at cultural sensitivity, notions around biases, whether they be implicit and unconscious biases, which are really important. De-escalation techniques, I've heard that from a lot of people, that de-escalation techniques, chronic and mental illness recognition, this crisis intervention. These are things that I've heard, and I'm going to give you a list, and I'm sure the list is much broader than that. But at least that was the thinking in terms of, training. And I think when you think about training, it's also practices. A lot of us have benefited from POP officers. Problem oriented policing, where these POP officers built these really unique relationships with our community. Is that the answer? I'm not sure, but the elements of POP officers, I'd love for you to kind of come back to us and tell us, is POP officers something that we can bring back? And if not, then how do we create this environment that maybe starts at the top and goes all the way through the department, where that community-oriented policing is real for all of us? So I think there, again, for me, has to be a significant increase in positive contact opportunities, meaningful training and dialogue, for our law enforcement officer and certainly our community. So that's kind of the training piece. The second area is diversity. And this was something that I've heard from everybody across the board of how important it is in terms of diversity. We all know that one of Sacramento's strengths is our diversity as one of the most diverse cities in the country. And we want to make sure that we're taking steps that our police department reflects the diversity of our community. Can we get there tomorrow? Probably not. But if there's a commitment day in and day out, and I think some folks said today that we need to put long-term things in place that are institutional, that are systematic, that are here a lot longer than we're here. And that's partly what we're trying to dig toward. So when I think about the diversity, it's certainly to implement, targeted hiring strategies focused on diversity, both long-term and sustainable, and not just diversity in terms of race, but diversity in terms of gender and diversity in terms of thought, because that's really important. We want to make sure all those elements of diversity are something that we're thinking about. We want to ensure that there's diversity in the policing leadership, to ensure every officer has an opportunity to attend leadership training classes, and that whole notion of the command structure as well. Again, not diversity for the sake of it, but we want to create an environment where we encourage it in a real way and people can move up in opportunities. This is something that I think is really important to all of us. So this is diversity/hiring. Can we encourage more of our police officers to live in the city or hire more officers from the city? How do we incentivize that? Is that doable with you talking to our SPOA? I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's something that we would all like to try to take a step toward that, or at least understand, what that would look like. So these were things that were really important to our community. I want to also make sure we encourage this notion when I think about recruitment. Bring back some of the strategies that you're already doing or that you might be thinking about doing on recruitment. We've talked about having a public safety charter school. Is that something that's an option? If it's not, then again, we'd love to hear your strategies in terms of that. So training was one, diversity was two, and then third was accountability. And this was something that was really important. What I've learned is, Chief, and sitting down with you and members of law enforcement, accountability is important for you guys, because if we're going to create an environment of public trust, there's got to be accountability for you guys first, and then for the community and how this goes together. So transparency, reforms, and open data, I think, are really important across the board. I'd like you to look at implementing a pilot program on body cameras. I think we all have seen. So we've all seen, what's happened and this notion of body cameras. I know there's an expense for a camera, and that's why a pilot program, maybe we start out with 25 or 50 or whatever it is that you think we can do. But there's also other expenses in terms of, it's not just the equipment, there's privacy issues, there's technologies, there's personnel, there's a number of issues, and we need to understand what that means. So that would be something that I felt fell under the accountability piece. We also have an office called the Public Safety Accountability Office. And I don't know if a lot of people know what that office is. So I'd like us to be able to better utilize that so that our community understands we actually have an Office of Public Safety and Accountability and what that office does and doesn't do. And I think once our community understands that, then that's another avenue for them to take advantage of, that they may or may not be able to do that. So I think that's, again, certainly important. We have a racial profiling commission. Maybe we need to look at retooling that, and how do we look at that in a broader way, or, an advisory piece. Those are things that I think our community wants to hear from us and give them a chance to weigh in. So those are the kind of things along that. I want to take a note here and just say to my colleagues on the council, I want us all to be aware nationally, there's a national movement toward independent investigation. So you guys know that I'm president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So around the country, federal policies, state policies in a real way that when there's an unarmed civilian that's shot, there's discussions about independent investigations or bringing in special prosecutors. So that's just something I want us to be aware of. It's a conversation that's happening around the country, and certainly it'll happen here in our state, and certainly I want us to be aware of that at the local level. So, Chief, that's the last piece in terms of accountability. And then the fourth area was just engagement in a real way, that our community wants to be engaged. And the more I've talked to members of law enforcement, they want that engagement too. And we've got to make sure that we're not just saying it. We got to define what engagement looks like, what it means, what's real and what's not real. So in the community side, we've met with ACT and NAACP and a number of faith leaders and organizations and a lot of you folks here. You guys represent that community engagement piece, and we want that to be community-led. And we're talking about, having town halls on a regular basis, having customer contract surveys so that we know from our community what's working and what's not working. We got to create a dialogue and an avenue where we can hear from, the community on a regular basis. We've talked about our youth, having youth listening and learning sessions. We've got to make, and this again, a lot of this is community driven for our youth. Community education events. These are all things that are really important. And I know from our standpoint, Chief, we have existing community engagement programs like Cops and Clergy, Cops and Kids, PAL, the Criminal Justice Academy. So I want to just make sure that these community-led efforts, that we are participating in those in a regular basis. So that way that dialogue is structured and it's real and it's something that's ongoing, not a one-off in one time. And then I think for all of us on the council, we've got to look at deepening our efforts to address the root causes of crime. There's a lot of underlying issues, and when you think about unemployment and education and jobs and social justice, these are real issues, and I don't know how we tackle all of them, but at least I want us to identify them. This arena was a great example. This wasn't about basketball. It was about jobs for people who normally were left on the sidelines. So we want to make sure that we have, those dialogues happening in real force. So what I would like to do from our council standpoint, so Chief, again, training, diversity, accountability, and engagement piece. Those are kind of the four buckets that I've heard everybody talk about. So from a council standpoint, what I want to do is establish a public safety committee, kind of similar to an ad hoc like we typically do. So I want to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to that. And I would like this ad hoc to be in place for 1 year. So 2015 will be what we do, and we'll do it on a regular basis. I've already talked to Councilmember Alan Warren about chairing it, and he said he would be happy to chair it. I would love Angelique and Rick to sit on it as well. So you would have 3 council members that would be willing to meet on a monthly basis on these issues. And Alan, what I would ask is a monthly meeting, maybe quarterly reports back into the council in terms of what you're seeing out there. Chief, I'd love for you to be a part of it, or have somebody on your team staff it. City manager, I want to make sure your office is certainly represented. The city attorney, Office of Public Safety and Accountability. We have all these pieces here, and a lot of times rearranging things so we're smarter and create the avenues that we need to have going forward will make a big difference. So that's kind of what I see is putting in place for 2015. I want us to be really proactive. Chief, 30 days to come back and kind of tell us where we are on a number of those issues, I think would be great. I would say to our community, there's going to be a lot of avenues for you to talk to us and get your voice heard in a real way. And I just want to close with this. I believe, as I said earlier, that we have a great police department, but we can do better, and we're willing to do that. Some of the ideas that you've heard, they're not new. Some are about, returning to our roots in many respects, or following through on what we say we're going to do. I know we've had budget cuts in the past, and as a relationship, we might, as a matter of fact, we've probably made cuts that might have impacted our ability to build community relationships, where our police department was forced to just focus on kind of the basic services. And now I want us to look at what our priorities are in a real way. So yes, responding to crime is part of it, but also this community engagement. So Chief, what I would say on this front is, bring back your plan, Tell us what the budget implications are to the best that you can. I'd really like to hear what a definition of success looks like. What does a good cop look like? What's a definite? Help us understand so that and if we can't get there overnight in a 30-day period, then maybe it's an extended period of time. But you believe in data in a real way, and help us, figure out how we're going to measure these things. I just don't want our officers to feel that the only way they're being successful is, arrests or dopes or guns. That's part of it. But can we measure and quantify the other side of it on the community engagement piece? And I know a lot of this might be easier said than done, but I think we're up, for a challenge in a real way. And I think this framework allows us to get back to the community in a meaningful way, proactive, and allows us to restore that connectivity between our officers and our community. So, Chief, thank you, and I want to thank all of our folks in uniform. And that pretty much concludes our council.